Hello, Dogg from Air fans. Today I am going to be looking at a speech by the renowned 19th century physician, Dr. William Osler. Here we go. This is a 1910, he calls it a lay sermon by the man, and the title is Man's Redemption of Man. This can be found at the Gutenberg.org. I'll put a link down below. So first of all, I know that William Osler is not a household name, so let's do a little brief recap of his biography before we get into the speech. Just taking this off of Wikipedia. So his full title was Sir William Osler, 1st Baronet, Fellow of the Royal Society, and a Fellow of the Royal College of Physicians. So Baronet is a noble title that was created for him. That's first, but he wasn't able to pass this on because both of his sons unfortunately preceded him in death. But he was given this baronetcy, I think they call it, for what he was to do in his life. So he was one of the 4 founding professors of Johns Hopkins Hospital, still pretty huge today. He's called the father of modern medicine, so there you go. And the thing that got me interested in him was he was the founder of the first History of Medicine Society. Well, this actually says, if you read about it, it says this is one of the oldest History of Medicine Society, part of the Royal Society of Medicine. I couldn't find anyone older. This was, let's see, 1912 is when it was. Yes, 1912 was when this was founded. So this is a man who started medical history in a lot of ways, and that's my real interest in him. But let's get on to what he is known for more broadly. He wanted to be known for the fact that he had medical students go out and actually interact with patients during their medical education. And so that sounds like a really great thing, and indeed it definitely is, but it brings up the question of how could that not have been something that was important prior to Dr. Osler. So, just think about that. So back to Johns Hopkins, 1876 was when Johns Hopkins University was founded, and that was the first time that they really had the bright idea that a medical student actually needed hands-on contact with patients. And then the other thing that he brought about was the residency program. So before this, and actually I just happened to be listening to NPR when they were talking about America's first lady doctor, Elizabeth Blackwell. She went to medical school from 1847 to 1849. Okay, so 2 years is all it took you in the 1840s to get a medical degree. And I think that was the case at least until 1876 when Johns Hopkins was founded. And so that was when they started, under Osler, they established the full-time residency system where physicians, medical students that is, would live on the campus, and they would live this, as they call it, a monastic life. I've always had a lot of, I think it's good. Medicine is obviously hard, but I've always had a lot of questions about this because it seems similar to boot camp. So it seems like being a doctor in a hospital really has to do a lot with the kind of experience where you're more indoctrinated than really given the chance to freely study what you feel is important or what's good for your patients. And to that point, I speak to a lot of doctors and nurses who work 12-hour days in the hospitals, and I just think you need to ask, is that good for the patients, for the doctors and nurses to be working that long? I think if you're going to have an accident, for example, you might want to consult the hospital schedule. Try and time your accident close to when they're fresh and have just gotten onto that shift rather than when they've been working 10 or 11 hours. So, but those are huge, um, huge developments in the field of medical education for sure. And William Osler is supposedly the guy that came up with those ideas. So that's why we're learning about him today. And he's also well known for a couple of controversies. The first is that he was apparently a proponent of mandatory euthanasia for the old. So he gave this speech where he was quoting the fixed period. This is something that they've, let's see, Anthony Trollope's The Fixed Period is a book where he's proposing that, because people are more active, I suppose, in, middle age, and they start to peter off in activity at some point, that we just kill them before they get to the point that they're no longer contributing to society. And so Osler gave a speech when he was retiring from Johns Hopkins to go somewhere else, that we should, implement this kind of thing. And it says here in the Wikipedia that, of course, he was just a practical joker. So that's why he said that. And then in the third edition of his textbook, he also coined the description of pneumonia as the friend of the aged, since it allowed elderly individuals a quick, comparatively painless death. Taken off by it in an acute, short, not often painful illness, the old man escapes those cold gradations of decay, so distressing to himself and his friends. And then, coincidentally, Osler himself died of pneumonia. But this is interesting because he died of pneumonia in 1919 during the Spanish flu, and so germane to our, COVID-19 stuff right now, he died of a respiratory illness at a time when there was a respiratory pandemic, and yet he somehow escaped being diagnosed with the disease that was causing that respiratory pandemic. Just an interesting aside there. And then this paragraph also belongs in the controversy article, but I think that some cheeky Wikipedia editor has moved it down to his personal life section. So an inveterate prankster, again, this is explaining why he would do this. He wrote several humorous pieces under the pseudonym Egerton York Davis, even fooling the editors of the Philadelphia Medical News into publishing a report on, you can read this if you want to, but basically what it says is that he wrote fake journal articles and got them published in journals. And he went so far as to, he would enhance Davis's myth by signing Davis's name to hotel registers and medical conference attendance lists. So remember, he's the founder of the first medical history society, and now they're saying he was a practiced hoaxer. He was making stuff up and getting it published, and he was also in charge of medical history. So that is really, really interesting when we're thinking about what we know about what we think we know about medicine. And he wrote a ton, which is why we're getting into some of what he wrote today. And from what I'm reading, he's very well read amongst physicians. All right. The one other thing I need to mention about his biography that's interesting is that, so in contrast to the idea that he was just an inveterate prankster, which is what Wikipedia claims, and I certainly can't contest because he died 100 years ago and I can't ask him, but regarding the first point that he thought, he was a proponent of mandatory euthanasia, he was also a founding donor of the American Anthropometric Society. So not just a member, but a founding donor of this. And the American Anthropometric Society, it's a society, it's a group that went around collecting people's brains and studying their shape. And so they're phrenologists. Let's see, the idea that you're measuring a person's head, and you can tell by the shape of their skull whether they're going to be a criminal or a genius, etc. And he was a big part of that. So, and that goes hand in hand with the idea of eugenics, that certain people should be allowed to breed and certain people should not be allowed to breed, or accurately, certain people should only be allowed to breed with other certain people of their comparable, class or abilities. So that is Osler. He was a pretty big guy, father of modern medicine, I'll just say again. And let's get on to his works. So this is Man's Redemption of Man. I picked this just for the title because it's getting right into the meat of the whole 19th century idea of that we have in science, that we don't need religion. We don't need a savior. We're better than that. Now we have science. We can do away with all that superstitious nonsense. And as you'll see as I go through, that's exactly what this speech is saying. So, first point, to man there has been published a triple gospel of his soul, of his goods, of his body. This is how he begins his speech. So the gospel, first gospel, the gospel of his relation to the powers unseen, that's the gospel of his soul, has brought sometimes hope, too often despair. In a wide outlook on the immediate and remote effects of the attempts to establish this relation, one event discredits the great counsel of Confucius, who realized what a heavy yoke religion might be to keep aloof from spiritual beings. Surviving the accretions of 20 centuries, the life and immortality brought to light by the gospel of Christ remain the earnest desire of the best portion of the race. So he's saying that whereas Confucius is cautioning that religion might be a heavy yoke for people to bear, the one example of religion that gives people hope then is Jesus Christ. And so, of course, I would agree with that there. He's using, this is the one time in his speech that he's using the word gospel as most people mean it. The good word, okay? But the gospel, so the gospel of, when he talks about the gospel of the soul then, he's talking about how we relate as people to the unseen powers, okay? So that doesn't mean God, okay? That means God and the devil and all the angels and demons and everything. He's not, just to make that clear, he's not talking about any specific way that we should relate to our souls, or he's not really even saying that there is a specific way, or, a gospel that, gives us that insight, that revelation, if you will. And then the gospel of his goods, man's relation to his fellow man. This just means to him, this is works, okay? This is what we do. And he's referring here to the principles of eternal justice, This is sort of a reference, I think, to that quote, the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. We've all heard that. And the third gospel, the gospel of his body, okay, and this is what he's going to really be talking about here as a physician, because he's concerned with healing the body. And he's saying the gospel of his body, which brings man into relation with nature, a true evangelion, the glad tidings of a conquest, beside which all others sink into insignificance, is the final conquest of nature, out of which has come man's redemption of man, the subject to which I am desirous of directing your attention. Okay, so we relate to our bodies in order to study nature, and by studying nature, then we can potentially know about God. Okay, so I want to contrast this triple gospel idea with the Christian idea that I was taught in church, at least, the idea of general revelation and special revelation. Okay, so just briefly, general revelation is the idea that by observing the world, which we call creation, we will eventually infer that there must have been some creator. There must be some outside observer or a point of reference in the way that everything works. It's just physics and chemistry and everything. When you look at this stuff scientifically and break it down, there just emerges the idea that some sort of an intelligence must be behind it. There can't the probability of everything that we experience coming about randomly, is exceedingly small. And then the idea of special revelation is the revelation of the gospel, and specifically of the incarnation of God in the person of Jesus Christ. So God exists. God is the creator, and it's inferable from creation, we can say. But Jesus is the Logos. Jesus is the name that we call God. That's how Jesus gives us the ability to know God. So it doesn't come from us; it comes from God, actually. And we don't have. So from this is what he's expressing here is the very common 19th century kind of idea. That I'll just get right into it. The next point I was going to make, that we're apart from God, and that we are, by our own power, we are struggling our way through, basically evolution, I guess you could say, to becoming gods on our own, and we don't need superstition or religion again, or even Jesus Christ to do this, right? Maybe at some point we did, but now we have science to replace all that. So he quotes Cardinal Newman, and this Cardinal Newman here, he's an interesting dude. This is him, John Henry Newman, 1801 to 1890. So he was an Anglican priest who converted to Catholicism. And of course, anytime someone who is prominent converts from one denomination to another, there's going to be a lot of, there's going to be a lot of attention put on him by the popular press. They're going to say, "Oh, look at this guy. He changed his mind. So let's all pay attention to, to what he has to say," because of course that's going to do nothing but draw dissension, divisiveness between, in this case, the Anglican Church and the Catholic Church. It's in no way is it going to bring them closer together. He was also most probably a, let's see where it says, potential homosexual. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it may have affected his theology. So let's get on to what he had to say, though. Right here it is. "Not only is the Creator far off, but some being of malignant nature seems to have gotten hold of us and to be making us his sport. Let us say that there are 1,000 millions of men on the earth at this time. Who can weigh and measure the aggregate of pain which this one generation has endured and will endure from birth to death? Then add to this all the pain which has fallen and will fall upon our race through generations past and to come. Is there not, then, some great gulf fixed between us and the good God?" And then, just to rub it in, he quotes Euripides: "Not to be born is the best, and next to die as soon as possible." So that's Cardinal Newman and Euripides. That's not Dr. Osler saying these things, but that's extremely pessimistic, I think. You gotta notice. So, and I wouldn't dispute the point that there is a ton of pain in the earth. Amongst humans, we all feel a lot of pain. We are separate from God to a greater degree than I think any of us really wishes. But the whole point of Christianity, or Christianity's take on that gulf, I have to argue, is that most importantly, it's because of us. It's not because of God willing it, and it's not because of nature. And that's the thing. It comes about because of our sin, or Adam's original sin changing us, or making the conditions different so that gulf would exist. And we bridge that gulf then, which is what the whole point of Christianity is. We bridge that gulf by apologizing, saying we're sorry, and putting our faith in Jesus Christ, that we don't have the power to bring this gulf, to close this gulf. We have to do it just through having our faith in Jesus Christ. That's how it's done. So, so really though, this whole thing makes the point that, the separation that exists between man and God is not from sin, it's from nature. And that is the idea that we get in the 19th century through all of these scientists. That's what we're dealing with today. Okay, and then going through all of this, he's just talking about how, science and philosophy, got us out of our dark state and has brought us up through, some evolutionary process, basically, better and better, closer to God, basically. And of course, so this is, he says, my generation was brought up in the belief that, quote, man was in his original state a very noble and exalted creature, being placed as the head and lord of this world, having all the creatures in subjection to him. The powers and operations of his mind were extensive, capacious, and perfect, unquote. To quote the words of one of my old Sunday school lessons, it is not too much to say that Charles Darwin has so turned man right about face that, no longer looking back with regret upon a paradise lost, he feels already within the gates of a paradise regained. So we're looking at the real exact time when this is kind of happening. So he's saying that his generation was brought up, to believe in this original, we were perfect in the garden and then we, sinned, etc. But, well, actually he doesn't mention that. But anyway, yeah, so we were perfect, but then Darwin came along and he doesn't even say that this didn't happen, but he says that now we no longer look back with regret upon a paradise lost. And now we already are within the gates of a paradise regained. So there you go. We're just evolving. We're on our way. We're getting her done there. And then, so he goes through all the sciences and chemistry and physics and how we're all great for having accomplished these things that we have through history. But of course, he's dealing with medicine, and so the greatest glory is the third and greatest glory is that the leaves of the tree of science have availed for the healing of the nations. And that's what he's getting into. And what he basically equates the idea of healing of the nations is with pain. Okay? And so he comes down here and he's talking about this. And he says, on October 16th, 1846, in the amphitheater of the Massachusetts General Hospital, a new Prometheus gave a gift as rich as that of fire, the greatest single gift ever made to suffering humanity. And that, of course, was ether. So he's saying that we conquered pain on 1846, but of course that is a conceit. We conquered pain in the context of an operating theater. So we're knocking people out with ether. We're putting them under general anesthesia. And that is what he is doing here in his speech. That's what he is equating with the conquest of pain. And even the curse of Eve, right? And of course, famously, it was a Queen Elizabeth who had ether administered to her during childbirth and was very, very pleased with that. But there's people walking around in pain all the time, and doctors. I mean, in my job, I deal with people in chronic pain all the time, and all the doctors can do is give them, opioids and things like that. So very, 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 very interesting that he's, kind of like George W. on the aircraft carrier with the mission accomplished sign there, in my opinion. But then an interesting thing to note about anesthesia, general anesthesia, that is every time you get put to sleep, there's a chance you won't wake up. So, and it's a good chance. It's really shocking to hear that because no one talks about it. But yeah, you have a pretty good chance of just not waking up anytime you have to go to, have surgery done on you. So it's almost like what's exactly like an initiatory process, and you're putting your faith in the physician, the anesthesiologist, to take you right to the brink of death and then bring you back healed. And this is what we're equating with, again, we're equating this with redemption, okay? Putting someone to sleep and not killing them and then removing their gallbladder or whatever is equated with redemption in the eyes of this prominent physician. All right, and we wouldn't be complete without touching on vaccination here on Dogg from Air. So what Dr. Osler had to say, I'll just read. Here I would like to say a word or two upon one of the most terrible of all acute infections, the one of which we first learned the control through the work of Jenner. That's the inventor of the vaccine. A great deal of literature has been distributed, casting discredit upon the value of vaccination in the prevention of smallpox. I do not see how anyone who has gone through epidemics as I have, or who is familiar with the history of the subject, and who has any capacity left for clear judgment can doubt its value. Yeah, I would doubt its value. I've seen the data and it doesn't seem to support it. But anyway, some months ago I was twitted by the editor of the Journal of the Anti-Vaccination League for maintaining a curious silence on the subject. I would like to issue a Mount Carmel-like challenge to any 10 unvaccinated priests of Baal. Very subtle. I will take 10 selected vaccinated persons and help in the next severe epidemic with 10 selected unvaccinated persons, if available. I should choose 3 members of parliament, 3 anti-vaccination doctors, if they could be found, and 4 anti-vaccination propagandists. And I will make this promise, neither to jeer nor jibe when they catch the disease, but to look after them as brothers, and for the 3 or 4 who are certain to die, I will try to arrange the funerals with all the pomp and ceremony of an anti-vaccination demonstration. So that's really great. So this was written in 1910, at which point, unfortunately, there pretty much weren't any smallpox epidemics in the West or anywhere really for him to test out this theory. But I was looking, and I found this the 1947 New York City smallpox outbreak, and which is considered to be the last outbreak of smallpox in America. So looked into this a little bit, and I found some interesting little tidbits I couldn't resist mentioning. Right, so Eugene Labar is patient 0 in this case. And the interesting thing here, on admission to Willard Parker, the differential diagnosis was drug reaction, since Labar had reported taking proprietary headache powders and aspirin, blah, 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 all these other things, or smallpox. However, because Labar had a smallpox vaccination scar, smallpox was immediately ruled out. Okay, so, and he did die, unfortunately. So the patient 0 in the last smallpox outbreak in North America was vaccinated against smallpox. So put that in your pipe and smoke it, vaxxers. 12 people died, or 12 people were sick, 2 people died, of whom one was this Labar, and 5 million people were vaccinated within the first 2 weeks after that outbreak. So I'd like to know how many of these 500 million had a vaccine reaction. Of course, it's not going to tell us, but polio started right about that time, so that's interesting. But back to our little talk, though. I think this is the meat of what I want to say. To any of you who wishes to know this side of science, what it is, what it has done, what it may do, let me commend Radeau's Life of Pasteur, which reads like a fairy tale, I'll say. It is more particularly in connection with the great plagues of the world that man's redemption of man may be in the future affected. I say in the future because we have only touched the fringe of the subject. Okay, one more time for that. It is more particularly in connection with the great plagues of the world that man's redemption of man may be in the future affected. So when I saw that, I just immediately thought, never let a good crisis go to waste. Okay, problem, reaction, solution, right here. This is what happens when you start with bad theology. You end up finding miracles in a ditch, literally. Okay, so and he does talk about those. He does talk about sanitation. He does talk about plumbing. Down here he's talking about the Panama Canal and things like that. And this is what. Of course, those were the things that caused the great, advances in quality of life of the 19th and early 20th centuries. Was just basic sanitation and people washing their hands, boiling water or drinking clean water, much more so than vaccinations, much more so. But here we are in the context of COVID. Is this anything other than a great reset? And we're talking about this 130 years ago, right? So we're using the Great Plagues, these moments in history, to convince ourselves of our own superiority as we conquer them. Okay, so never mind the fact that we caused them in the first place by creating these conditions of squalor. Okay, never mind that we caused them in the first place by our own rebelliousness. But down at the very bottom now, you can see it's not that long of a speech. He says, the new socialism of science, with its definitive mission, cares not a rap for the theories of Karl Marx, of Ferdinand Lassalle, or of Henry George, still less for the dreams of Plato or of Sir Thomas More, or at least only so far as they help to realize the well-being of the citizen. Okay, so I've been saying this for years now. This is why when you say to a progressive, hey, this is what Marx really said, he'll say, well, that doesn't matter because we're so far past Marx now, okay? Because the belief is that socialism is based on science, and that's what this guy is saying right here. The belief is that we're progressing, we're evolving, fits and starts, and experimentally to this perfect state, okay? And then of course, on the subject of state, the final little thing is just his jab at people anyone who disagrees, right? Anyone who disagrees with anyone who disagrees with the idea that we're on this way toward a perfect state, right? You are just a dour dyspeptic, he calls us, sitting idly croaking like ravens, right? And do something about it, you guys, you ravens. Do something about the loss annually to the state of thousands of valuable lives. The loss to the state of thousands of valuable lives is how we're measuring this whole thing. This is why we matter as people, because we matter to the state, okay? And let them fight for the day when a man's life shall be more precious than gold to the state. This is what they were saying. So this is William Osler, the father of modern medicine, and so he's an extremely important historical figure, and I just wanted to learn more about how he felt about things and what he had to say. So I hope you appreciated that. Give me some comments. Please like and share this video. This has been Evan Benton for F Dogg for Mayor. Thank you and good night.